Some things happen in life and seem ordinary in the moment, yet later you realize they were the beginning of everything. That's exactly how it started. Anthony, my husband, was a kind and generous man at 61, the kind who never hesitated to help family. When he invited his nephew Eric to stay with us for a few weeks before starting university, I thought nothing of it. Just another young man finding his way. But I was wrong. Before leaving for a short business trip, Anthony gave me one of his usual serious looks. "Daisy, take good care of him," he said. "He's a sensitive boy. Trouble sleeping, needs structure. He's been through a lot." I promised I would, but inside I laughed a little. Eric wasn't a boy anymore. He was 20, tall, broad-shouldered, with that quiet confidence that only comes from youth. There was something about him that always carried a trace of warmth, a spark of curiosity that made every room feel lighter. Still, I never thought anything of it. Until Anthony drove off that morning. The house felt different once the car disappeared down the road. Quieter? Yes, but not empty. I could almost feel Eric's presence before hearing him. When his footsteps reached the kitchen, I turned, and for a second, forgot how to speak. His hair was slightly messy, his shirt wrinkled from sleep, and his smile, that familiar, easy smile. "Morning, Daisy," he said, voice soft, almost teasing. "Smells amazing. What's for breakfast?" "Just something simple," I managed, pretending to focus on the eggs. He stepped closer, close enough for me to catch his scent. Fresh, clean, unmistakably youthful. "Then I'm sure it's perfect," he said. That small, harmless comment stayed with me longer than I expected. It shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. The air between us felt charged, too heavy for such a small kitchen. When he finally sat down, the silence was almost intimate, like two people waiting for something unspoken to surface. He started talking about university, about how he wasn't sure what he wanted to study. I listened, nodding, though my mind kept drifting elsewhere. There was something disarming about his openness, how easily he spoke about fear, doubt, and hope. It reminded me of who I had once been before life became a list of responsibilities. Then, with a light laugh, he said, "You know, Daisy, for someone who worries about everyone else, you never seem to let anyone worry about you." I froze, surprised. "That's a strange thing to say." He shrugged. "Maybe, but it's true." For a moment, I couldn't reply. He wasn't flirting, at least not intentionally. But somehow, in that simple exchange, I realized the walls I had built around myself weren't as strong as I thought. And as I stood there, stirring coffee that had long gone cold, I couldn't shake one thought. 3 days alone with Eric had just begun. That first day passed quietly, but the silence between us felt heavier with every hour. I busied myself cleaning, cooking, doing anything to distract from the strange energy in the house. Eric stayed mostly in the living room, headphones on, sketching in his notebook. Every so often, I'd catch him glancing toward the kitchen. Not long, just enough to make me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. When evening came, I set the table for 2. He offered to help, and though I said it wasn't necessary, he joined me anyway. "Uncle Anthony doesn't realize how lucky he is," he said casually while handing me the plates. I raised an eyebrow. "Lucky? To have someone who makes a house feel like home." I smiled, unsure how to answer. Compliments like that used to make me nervous, but there was no mockery in his tone, just quiet sincerity. It made me realize how starved I'd been for simple appreciation. Over dinner, we talked about small things, his favorite movies, his plans after graduation, the challenges of growing up in a world that seemed to move faster than anyone could keep up. His honesty reminded me of a younger version of myself before the years had worn me down into routine. When he asked about my life, I hesitated. "There's not much to say," I admitted. "Marriage, work, keeping things running, ordinary stuff." He studied me for a moment, then said softly, "That sounds lonely." I didn't answer, maybe because he was right. After dinner, Eric suggested we celebrate. "Uncle told me you're finally buying that new house," he said, his eyes bright. "That deserves a toast." I laughed. "It's not finalized yet." "Then we'll celebrate early," he said, already searching through the cabinet for glasses. His youthful enthusiasm was contagious. We clinked our drinks lightly, and for a moment, the world outside disappeared. The candlelight flickered across his face, and I realized how much energy he brought into the space, how alive the house suddenly felt. As the night went on, the conversation deepened. He told me about his insecurities, about never feeling good enough, about losing his father young. I found myself leaning forward, listening, feeling protective in a way that blurred the lines between care and connection. "You don't need to prove anything," I said. "You're already more than enough." He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time there was no teasing in his eyes, just quiet understanding. It was past midnight when I finally stood. "We should get some rest," I said. "Tomorrow's another long day." He nodded but didn't move. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for listening." That simple gratitude reached somewhere deep inside me. It wasn't attraction I felt, it was awakening. A reminder that I could still be seen, still be heard, still matter. And as I turned off the lights that night, I caught my reflection in the glass. Softer, lighter, almost like a woman rediscovering herself. The next morning felt different. Lighter, almost hopeful. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, painting golden lines across the table where we'd talked the night before. Eric came down the stairs humming softly, hair still damp from the shower. "Morning, Daisy," he said, that same warm smile on his face. "You look rested." I almost laughed. I haven't slept this well in years. He sat across from me, and for a while, we just shared quiet company. No tension, no uncertainty, just two people existing in a rare kind of peace. The simplicity of it was grounding. But deep down, I knew something had shifted permanently. Later that afternoon, we went for a walk around the garden. Eric talked about leaving soon for university, about wanting to do something meaningful, maybe even build a home like ours one day. I listened, realizing how much I would miss his presence once he was gone. For the first time in a long while, I felt connected. To life, to possibility, to myself. As we stood by the old oak tree, he said, "You know, Uncle Anthony's lucky. You make people feel safe." I looked at him, surprised again by his insight. "Do I?" "Yeah," he said. "But I think sometimes you forget that you deserve that same feeling, too." His words hit harder than I expected. I realized he wasn't just talking about me. He was reminding me of something I'd long buried. The truth was, I had spent years pouring energy into everyone else's comfort while neglecting my own need for warmth, for affection, for joy. That night, when Eric thanked me again before heading to bed, I could see it in his expression. The respect, the gratitude, the quiet care. It wasn't infatuation. It was something purer, something that healed both of us. After he went upstairs, I sat alone in the dim living room, thinking about the past few days. About how easily one person's presence could remind you that you're still alive inside. About how loneliness doesn't always need to be filled. It just needs to be acknowledged. When Anthony called to say he'd be home in the morning, I smiled softly. Nothing had happened, not in the way stories like this often go, but something far more meaningful had taken place. A woman rediscovered the part of herself she thought had disappeared. A young man found someone who truly listened, and both would walk away, changed. I cleaned the table, turned off the lights, and whispered to the quiet house, "Thank you." As I climbed the stairs, I realized that the past 3 days hadn't been about temptation or guilt. They'd been about awakening, the moment when the soul decides to breathe again. And maybe that's what every human story is really about, the quiet rediscovery of what makes us feel alive. If this story stirred something in you, tell me what moment hit you the hardest. Was it the loneliness or the rediscovery? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind you of life's quiet turning points.